Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Currott Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2012 movie titled Beasts of the Southern Wild. Now, Beasts of the Southern Wild is a fantasy drama that runs for 93 minutes long, and it stars Quvenzhane Wallis, Dwight Henry, Levi Easterly, Phillip and Gina. It is directed by Benh Zeitlin, and the script was done by Benh Zeitlin and Lucy Alabar, and it is based on Lucy Alabar's one-act play titled Juicy and Delicious. The production was done by Dan Janvey, Josh Penn, and Michael Gottwald, and the score was done by Benh Zeitlin and Dan Romer. The cinematography was done by Ben Richardson, and the editing was done by Crockett Dube and Alfonso Goncalves, and it is distributed by Fox Searchlight Pictures. This movie also was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. No winners, but Quvenzhane Wallis broke the record by being the youngest actress to ever be nominated for Best Leading Actress at the very young age of 9. Quite a milestone there. Beasts of the Southern Wild had 90 awards and nominations. Some of the many awards include the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival and the Camera d'Or at the 2012 Cannes Film Festival, and rightfully deserving at that as well. Why? Because it is an amazing film with one of the most original father-daughter relationships that you would have to see in order to believe. The vast combination, it has a little bit of a Maurice Sendak with fantasy sequences, including prehistoric beasts called the aurochs, which were actually, like, I guess you could say, the predecessors to the modern day cattle, which had been extinct since 1627. And it's also mixed in with Cajun lifestyles and Bayou traditions, because the setting of the movie is set in an area known simply as the Bathtub, which is a ramshackle community outside the Louisiana Peninsula. It's very isolated. The living conditions is quite poor, and even, I guess you could say, the ways of life is not, based on materialism or, when you're getting your next paycheck or whatnot. They have, like, other issues that that concerns them that may seem kind of, alien to us, or maybe even not necessarily deemed as important to us, but is more important to them. Beasts of the Southern Wild relishes nicely in both its style and its substance. With a cast of relatively unknowns, they really outperformed themselves quite brilliantly. The story is about a little girl who goes by the name of Hush Puppy, played by Quvenzhane Wallis, who's an adventurous, precocious little girl raised in a single-parent home along with her tempestuous father, who goes by the name of Wink, played by Dwight Henry. And like I mentioned before, they live in the Delta Islands, an area in the Delta Islands better known as the Bathtub. The area is predominantly a ramshackle community where the inhabitants have lived there spanning many generations. They live the lives they've been accustomed to, following traditions and are practically isolated from the material world that we live in, which is blocked off from the rising waters that are a hindrance to both the communities. It's very tantalizing just much precaution and structuring it was to make this community rich in culture and detail. Like I say, and what I mean by culture and detail, they deal with stuff that concerns them more than just, you know, getting that new iPhone or getting those new designer shoes or those cool sneakers that we're more concerned about. They're concerned about issues involving the environment. They're also dealing with issues about an unforeseen future of what little or they have left. You know, the way they live, the community almost looks like a post-apocalyptic utopia, even though it's not. But the area is quite condemned. Everybody seems to kind of live in squalor, and they actually don't seem to really mind about that because, like I said, they're not living in the material world. They're living more in an environmentally friendly world, and they're concerned more about ecological problems as opposed to materialistic stuff that our needs and wants seem to somewhat feed upon. Lo and behold, during this movie, the ice caps melt, a terrible storm is brewing, even prehistoric animals like the aurochs have seemed to come back to life. And while this is happening, Hush Puppy's father, Wink, played by Dwight Henry, who seems to somewhat have a bit of a semi-bipolar demeanor towards him. I mean, at some points he's this intimidating, short-tempered, alcoholic, abusive guy, and then next thing you know, as the film progresses, he becomes more of a loving, caring father who's pretty much on the brink of death. So now he's kind of like sort of toughening up Hush Puppy because, you know, she's on the brink of becoming kind of like an orphan. The film's original execution is that it refrains from actually avoiding the traditional narrative approach. Instead, it kind of somewhat awkwardly meshes the scenes and sequences together to give an in-depth view of Hush Puppy's view of the world. We definitely do feel a deep sympathy for Hush Puppy because her father is terminally ill and her mother abandoned them many years ago. Having the fear of being alone in the world and the concerns of potential ecological disasters, she kind of struggles to keep balance with herself. Lo and behold, a terrible storm has hit the community, and her identity and her safety and the fear of being alone is in a more chaotic jeopardy. The community itself is at a crossroads as they struggle to pull together to do everything they can to maintain their dignity and their ways of life. And it comes even to a point where, you know, potential workers and helpers who cross their territory feel like, you know, they're there to do good deeds, but they get, you know, kind of crossed off and dismissed by these people, and that's because they don't want, or they may possibly fear that these guys are going to take over and that their community, the bathtub, will end up becoming part of that material world, and they have fought for many years to reserve their ways of life, and they don't really take kindly to intruders, and that's kind of believable, you know. And I really actually enjoyed the fact that, you know, they're a proud group and they don't really necessarily need the help from the outside world, and I understand that. The movie does have a bit of a nod to the infamous Hurricane Katrina going for it. Who can ever forget in 2005, the infamous Hurricane Katrina, where we almost thought that the city of New Orleans was going to be covered up entirely of water. It would be almost like watching a modern day Atlantis, if you do believe that there ever was a lost continent of Atlantis. But we do see Hush Puppy learn to accept the world she lives in, and she is rapidly changing before her and our very eyes. The colorful details are truly something the eyes can enjoy. The nature's many colors can almost feel like a character in itself, and the Cajun customs. The nature is to be cherished and to be respected at all costs. Not only is the film eye candy, but ear candy as well, as the soundtrack will have you humming to the tunes, or even manipulate you to dance as well. I love the juxtaposition of reality and fantasy sequences, as they are evenly proportioned, and it works considering that the narrative is seen through the eyes of a young, precocious child. With the incredible acting of the two leading stars, Quvenzhane Wallis and Dwight Henry, the audiences feel like they're part of this journey and what lies ahead of them as this film progresses. Even though the lack of a concrete narrative is original and works on a myriad of levels, there is a reason why this film is not entirely 100% perfect. Sometimes the scenes segue into one another without really any aim, and sometimes it seems like it has no real purpose or direction. And while the second act of the movie has more depth and dimension to the world they live in, the story and the character development seems to fade out along the way. This is not particularly a character-driven film, but more like an imaginative world seen through the eyes of a 6-year-old. And though it may look jilted and all, still the mind of a 6-year-old is pretty much unsettling. Because, you know, kids have this more curious mindset than adults. While adults are pretty much concrete, they seem to somewhat know the odds and ends of the world. A 6-year-old is completely oblivious still to the world they live in, and there's still a lot to learn about the world we live in when you're a 6-year-old. But to summarize, Beasts of the Southern Wild is an originally crafted story told through the views of one of the most endearing children's characters I have seen in many years. It's definitely a carefree fantasy story that must be seen to be amazed. If I was to give this story a scale out of 10, I would definitely give it a 9. Would I recommend kids to come and see this movie? Certainly. And maybe even adults, you know, to bring their children with them. You know, parents should bring their children, or children should bring their parents, so that they can get a better understanding of how a kid's mind operates. And maybe there might be like a better connection, a better link between parents and children. So I guess that kind of like ends my writer review. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to write back to me, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back again with another review. Until next time, have a good day, everyone. Goodbye. Goodbye.